Breaking Up with Addiction is proudly sponsored by experts you can trust. Kindbridge Behavioral Health, safe, non-judgmental counseling, just a tap away. I'm Coach Corinne Wright, a certified executive coach and certified recovery coach.
And I'm Gwendolyn Boyd McGee, a licensed clinical counselor.
Together, we bring coaching and therapy to the table, helping you not just understand addiction, but giving you the tools to break free from it. Our show focuses on education and therapy, as well as coaching, offering listeners actionable steps to regain control.
So let's get into it. Today's episode is How Did We Get Here? This episode takes a deep dive into the history of gambling, how it became such a significant part of our culture, and why so many people find themselves trapped in its grip. With March Madness in full swing, one of the biggest betting events of the year, we're breaking down how gambling evolved from casual entertainment to a widespread high-risk addiction.
Let's dig into the history of gambling. And we're going to take you back to 3000 BCE. The earliest evidence of gambling appeared in Mesopotamia with six-sided dice. And I know today lots of you are familiar with dice games, and maybe not today as much as people in the 70s and 80s and 90s were, but still, we all know what dice is. But to consider that it came along so far back, I want to know what comes to mind when you think about dice back in the 3000 BCE days, Gwen.
Well, I don't know. I just always, in our neighborhood, people would say shooting craps. So that's what I was thinking about when you talked about it. I wonder what they called it back then. I'm sure it was something different.
You bring a good point. We call it dice. We've called it shooting craps, but I wonder what they did call it back then, 3000 BCE. Coming up to 500 BCE, gambling spread through the ancient Greece and Rome. Dice games became more popular. I remember shows that come on TV about, Spartans fighting and all those kinds of gladiator movies that are out, and how even in those arenas, people were sacrificing their lives instead of things like money today for gambling. Today, gambling isn't necessarily considered a violent sport, but back then it surely was.
Yeah, definitely. With those arenas, I'm sure that a lot of our listeners they've seen the new movie Gladiator. It was a part two from the original Gladiator. But yeah, it's horrible, very gory. Most of the gladiators ended up just suffering a really traumatic death.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there were the people out there in the arenas, placing their bets.
And back then, the gamble was final. There was no ability to chase the loss if you lost your life.
Absolutely.
Let's jump into the 800s CE. And this is when, playing cards are entered China, right? And the card games. And when I think about playing cards, the first thing that popped in my head, other than like Uno, really is bingo. Even though bingo is not necessarily a card game as much as it is between a card/board game kinda. But cards is something that can be considered very innocent, but it also has a different side that can be very, very dangerous, like the casino games that come with cards.
Right. So, yeah, very innocent, go fish, playing that with cards. But, it could be very dangerous if you're playing blackjack.
Absolutely.
Or 21. Yeah.
Similar to bingo, which could be seemingly harmless, but bingo is a silent threat because it's also you putting up money with the gamble of either getting more money or losing your money. It just doesn't appear to hurt people as much when they think about bingo games, but that's still a form of gambling.
Well, it just depends on how, severely addicted you are. Yeah. Because I have seen people that are bingo players not be willing to miss bingo for anything. As a matter of fact, there was a lady who needed to go to the hospital. She was really sick, but she would not go to the hospital until she went to bingo and finished her game, and then she went.
The intensity, that need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're shackled to something, like a gambling addiction, it can just completely take over your life and become the most important thing in your life.
And we want you to think about these statements that we're making and consider the first time you might have been exposed to gambling behavior, no matter how innocent or harmful you think that behavior may have been. Just consider the first time you were exposed to gambling behavior as we continue on this journey of the history of gambling. Coming up on the 17 and 1800s, gambling expanded across Europe and America, including lotteries, horse racing, and saloons offering card games.
Yeah, the saloons were trying to get them in there, huh?
Mm-hmm. And when you think about that, Gwen, you think about saloon and gambling and card games. It's almost like the seed of a casino because there's alcohol in the saloons. It's dim lit, there's music in there. All of this is
they want to create an environment that is conducive to you spending more of your money. I mean, so I assume, I'm not sure if you know for sure, Corinne, but did the drinking and maybe free drinks start in the saloon Wild West era, or did it take longer for them to come up with that?
Ooh, that's a good question. Honestly, are you asking me or are you asking for facts? Because if you ask me, that's where it started. However, there are facts to that. Actually, Gwen, that was the early 20th century. It was in the 1940s and 50s when Las Vegas casinos began offering complimentary drinks as a way to attract more gamblers and keep them playing longer. We're coming up on...
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, because even now, a lot of the people that I speak with, they talk about, some of the relapses that they've experienced have come with at the times when maybe they've had a couple of drinks.
Mm-hmm.
They feel a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
And sometimes forget about all the other things.
Absolutely.
And that kind of that is something that could definitely make a difference for a gambler.
I'm glad you brought that point up because this is something important for listeners to understand is that problem gambling behavior comes with co-occurring disorders 9 times out of 10. And in this case, this person would have a co-occurring disorder being alcoholism. And it's not always a co-occurring disorder, but there is a co-occurring occurrence of something similar that accompanies gambling behavior. So some people who drink and then feel the need to gamble, there may be a possibility that the need is to decrease drinking to manage the gambling behavior.
Yes. Yeah, and research studies have indicated that treating both disorders at the same time is really the most effective treatment.
Yes.
Because think about it. I mean, you can get triggered from either one of those things. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be that you're working on the gambling and then you kind of get that under control, but the drinking has not been addressed. And it could be that you just decide to go out socially to the bar and have a few drinks. And the next thing you know, you're driving to the casino.
That sounds like a likely story.
Yes. And or it could be the other way around. You don't have your drinking under control, right? Mm-hmm. But you have addressed the gambling. So either one, it could trigger you either way.
Absolutely. And if you don't have your drinking under control and get to that casino, you know what's going to happen when they pass you free drinks.
That's right. Absolutely.
So now we're going into Vegas, Gwen, because, that's where it all started. Now we're in the 1970s and the 1980s. Actually, let's back up to 1931. That's when Las Vegas legalized gambling, cementing its place as the global gambling hub. When people hear Vegas, the first thing is going to come to mind is going to be casinos. I know that's what comes to mind when I hear Vegas.
Oh, yes, because, when you're in Vegas, you're inundated with all of these gambling opportunities. You get off the plane and exit into the airport, and you immediately start seeing slot machines.
Boom, lights, sounds, all the bells and whistles.
Right. And so, you may have plans to not gamble when you're in Vegas, and maybe you want to stay at a hotel that's off the strip. I mean, you can gamble pretty much anywhere you go. You go to the convenience store, you can gamble
Yeah.
there. You go to the restaurant, some of the restaurants, they have opportunities to gamble there. So Vegas is definitely a place that could really be a problem for a person who is struggling with problem gambling.
Absolutely. It's the entire culture of Vegas is drenched in gambling culture. So it's hard to make a trip there and not do it unless you are being intentional about your planning.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now we're jumping back up to the 1970s and 80s. This is the rise of state-run lotteries and the expansion of casino gambling in the United States. So Vegas started it, and now it's widespread in the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
When I think back to those times, I don't really personally think about casinos and gambling. I more so think about bell bottoms and music. But there were people back then dealing with problem gambling that no one was aware of, because to people, even to date, a lot of people look at gambling as a choice.
Right. Yeah, but the DSM-5 clarifies that, and it shows the criteria that a person would need to meet in order to be diagnosed with a gambling disorder. So I was really happy and pleased to know that, that's something that the experts decided to do, because there was a time, in our history where people just felt like it was just a lack of self-control or character defects,
Mm-hmm.
or just, something that stigmatized people, with gambling disorders. But once they did list it in the DSM-5, then it became more of a mental health disorder, something that a person at one point during their journey, it no longer becomes a choice for them. And that is when it becomes a disorder.
Oh, yeah. And, while we're on the topic of the DSM-5, this is a place where non-substance related disorders live. And among those disorders is gambling. If you are curious as to whether or not you are a problem gambler, according to the DSM-5, there are a list of questions that you can ask and answer yes or no to that will help you determine whether you're a mild, moderate, or severe problem gambler. We'll go through those questions now to give you an opportunity to determine where you stand. Need to gamble with increased amounts of money in order to achieve the desired excitement.
Are you restless or irritable when attempting to cut down or stop gambling?
Have you made repeated, unsuccessful efforts to control, cut back, or stop gambling?
Are you often preoccupied with gambling, like having persistent thoughts of reliving past gambling experiences, handicapping or planning the next venture, or thinking of ways to get money with which to gamble?
Do you often gamble when facing distress, helplessness, guilt, anxiousness, or depression?
After losing money gambling, do you often return another day to get even, like chase your losses?
Are you lying to conceal the extent of involvement with gambling?
Have you jeopardized or lost a significant relationship, job, or educational or career opportunity because of gambling?
Are you relying on others to provide money to relieve desperate financial situations caused by gambling? Now we're going to look at where you fall in these criteria. If you're someone who answered yes to 4 or 5 of these criteria, you are considered a mild problem gambler.
If you answered yes to 6 to 7 of the criteria, that means that you're moderate.
And if you answered yes to 8 or 9 of these criteria, that means you are a severe problem gambler. Now, this is not to judge you. This is just to educate you on where you fall based on behavior. That answer, we're going to take you into where gambling has transformed today.
So, Corinne.
Yes.
I believe one of the most significant events that really changed the way that we gamble today.
Don't you say
America,
it. Don't you say it.
COVID-19. coronavirus. Think
Yes.
back to 2020 when we all were told to shelter in place. A lot of the businesses were closing. Vegas pretty much was closed. So people who were traditionally used to going to the casino, guess what they started doing, Corinne?
What did they start doing, Gwen?
They started betting online because, it was very convenient.
Mm.
And they couldn't go to the casino. So they changed their betting the way that they made bets and the way that they gambled. Instead of going into the casino in person physically, people started gambling online. So many countries around the world started to relax their laws and regulations for online betting, and online betting increased. People were sheltering at home, when they're used to a usual routine of getting up, going out, going to work, their children going to school. Now everything changed. Children were needing to be educated at home. I'm sure that caused a lot of additional stress and anxiety for people. And, add in the factor that many Americans were losing their lives. It was a horrible time. So imagine people being stuck at home, can't go anywhere. They're getting bored.
Yeah.
And they're trying to find activities and events, things that are going on online. And they kind of just start gambling online for fun.
Yeah.
It keeps them preoccupied, gives them something to do. Some of the other people who were experiencing this stress and anxiety, they kind of wanted an escape.
Yeah.
So they used it to kind of get away. It was their thing, and it gave them something to do. But they did not anticipate becoming addicted.
Exactly. It's funny that you mention, people turning to their devices. It was something that was so accessible for people to get to those gambling and gaming apps, and the increase in the gambling apps that came out after post-COVID. It's interesting to see how people have shifted into the same levels of comfort, just in different ways. This is a coping mechanism. Like you said, people are looking for a way to escape. And during COVID, being sheltered in place, losing loved ones where there's nowhere to go really. You have to have a way out, right? And a lot of people turn to gambling for that way out, but gambling turned against them with the outcome. So this is, seeing how we've come to, we started back with, 6-sided dice, from dice to card games to the harmless games that we see on apps that some of them don't start out dealing with money at all, but then later they'll create a side that deals with money. And, the interesting part about this is the range of people who this does impact.
Right. Absolutely. Now, the interesting thing is that online gambling is affecting our adolescents and young adults more than any other demographic in our population. So, that's like a current trend because they didn't have access, the way they do now. They didn't have that pre-COVID. So I've heard stories of high school students getting older people to place bets for them. I've heard stories about maybe them getting their parents' phones or asking to use the parents' phones and putting all of the parents' information on betting sites so that they can utilize it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so with this affecting our youth, this is a huge issue. And this is something that people should be talking about more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for parents, we really encourage you to just build your awareness or raise your awareness on, whether or not your youth are sports betting, because I know plenty of parents who will hear the term sports betting and they'll say, oh yeah, my kid's into that. Do you know what sports betting is? And if you're not educated on what it is and how it can impact them, that might be something to consider educating yourself a little bit more on so that you can be aware of the potential harm that is right there in their hands when they're on your phones or on their phones and they're just on those apps having the time of their lives. What tends to happen is you got to wonder, if my youth is sports betting, where are they getting this money from? And if they do have a job or allowance or wherever they have access to this money from, what happens when they lose? Are they going to come to you for the money? Are they going to go to a friend for the money? Or are they going to come up with creative ideas to get that money?
You make some really good points. And so I'm hoping that there are listeners, parents that are hearing this and that they can become a little bit more mindful of what's going on and what their children are doing, on their phones.
Absolutely.
Have they downloaded any, gambling apps? Corinne, I would really love to share some information with you about some other current trends and statistics that are, current in the US. I know that we were focusing on the youth population because it is very alarming with, the things that are going on and the challenges that they're facing. So I want to talk about what the gambling looks like in the US currently. There are venues like casinos, sports books, bingo halls, and card rooms pretty much throughout the US, with the exception of Hawaii and Utah. Really? Yeah. Now, Utah, I understand. I kind of immediately thought, considering that there is a very large population of Mormons, that they have very strict religious beliefs that don't allow gambling. So, I mean, even so, I'm sure that there may be, even if it's a small percentage of the population, right? Yeah, that there's probably some people who are still struggling. It's just maybe not a very significant percentage, but that is something that we can explore at a later time. So moving on, the slots are actually the most popular form of gambling, with about 68% of people wanting to use that way to gamble. Actually, the slot machines are the bread and butter for the casinos because that is where most of the revenue is generated from. So the information and statistics that I'm sharing with you, there was a study that was published in gamblingindustrynews.com, and the study was conducted in 2022. It shows that 84 million people visited a casino in the USA in 2022, that 47 states have legal casino gaming through tribal or commercial venues. And actually, Oklahoma has the highest number of tribal casinos and tribal gaming venues, which I believe they have a total of about 140. Yeah, Oklahoma is kind of infamous for gambling, so that makes sense. So the average age of a U.S. casino patron in 2022 was 42.4 years old, which is right about middle age. So that's pretty interesting. So since we have been focusing on March Madness, I wanted to end my little walk down current trends and statistics with just some interesting information concerning sports betting. So 70% of the U.S. sports bettors gamble weekly, while 25% of them gamble daily, right? When I saw that, I was like, wow, because I have been seeing quite a few clients who are, struggling with sports betting. So another interesting thing, which kind of makes sense, the National Football League, the NFL, is the most wagered on sports league in the U.S., while the annual Super Bowl is the most wagered on single sporting event in the U.S., attracting about 50 million adults in 2023 that actually placed a wager. So research also suggests that the 35 to 44-year-old age group is the most active, with as many as 15% of the group betting at least once a week, and that 74% of regular U.S. sports bettors have more than one mobile sports betting account. So yeah, wow. Yeah, it's some incredible information.
And we just want to point out the two types of gamblers that there are, so that whether you're a parent who's, has children, or whether you are an adult who has problem gambling, there's the action and there's the escape. Action gamblers plan to win money based on their perceived skills. This is people who want to play things like poker, blackjack, and then we have the escape gamblers. In my experience, and I want to hear yours too, Gwen, I have way more escape gamblers than action. And escape gamblers are people who are escaping their emotions. They're playing against the machines and avoiding human contact, games of luck and slots and lottery and things like that. And the reason why it's important to understand the type of gambler a person is because when we talk about the things that can help people, we have to know what it is that we're helping. And so if this person is an action gambler, you would take similar but different approaches than if this person is an escape gambler. In your background and experience, what type of gamblers do you see more of?
Well, I see more escape gamblers. I have seen some action gamblers, but most of the clients that I've worked with are trying to escape, get away. They're using it as pretty much like a coping strategy, but it's an unhealthy coping strategy. Yeah. So, yeah, there's that. So, Corinne, now that we have discussed the history of gambling and some of the current trends, how did we get here?
How did we get here?
Yeah.
Well, a little bit about me. I have a bachelor's degree in human resource management, business and human resource management, and a background in higher education. I spent about 10 years in higher ed working for private universities with people between the ages of 18 and 65. And the last few years of my career in that university was coaching. My sole role was to develop action plans for anywhere from 250 to 400 students every 10 weeks. It was aggressive. I loved and hated it at the same time. But that's what kind of pruned me to have this etched way of helping people to solve problems in a way, listening to the backgrounds of all these different people from different backgrounds, different ages, and having to help them all to develop action plans that led them to the same place, the same goal. And with that, coming to a point of getting laid off in 2013 and discovering what will I do next and having to challenge myself with, keeping it going. I decided to pursue my certification in executive coaching and launched a business coaching company, helping people become entrepreneurs. Ran that for several years before realizing I really missed the life problems. Gwen, I wanted problems. Bring me your problem. And so I did. I wanted to life coach so much more than I wanted to offer business coaching. I got laid off from the university in 2013. And all I knew before I got laid off 2 years prior to that was that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Everyone I bumped into who asked me what I was doing next, it was entrepreneurship. And I had no plan and no idea what that looked like. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. And so I wrote affirmations on my mirror on sticky notes. I would take one a day to work. I would, speak that affirmation. I would, create the world I wanted. I had no gossip zone in my cubicle. I was just coaching myself through how do I navigate from here to the next. And then when I got laid off, I had no choice but to figure it out. So I started volunteering. And while volunteering, that led me to pursuing my coaching certificate in executive coaching and launched a business coaching company, ran that for about 4 or 5 years, helping people who wanted to become entrepreneurs. And I realized that I loved and missed life coaching so much that I just had to dissolve that business and create Coach Right Consulting in 2017. I wanted the life problems. Bring me your worst, and let's map a process to get you away from where you are and where you want to be. And so when I launched my practice, this was in 2017, I did some traveling, lived in a couple of countries for a while, just to let myself feel what it means to be a free entrepreneur and a coach. I really wanted this idea in my head to be realized. And it was. I came back, I had updated my website. I spoke at a university for over 400 staff, teaching them one of my workshops. Wow. And I'm like, yes, let's go. COVID said, no, sit down. reconfigure what you're going to do with yourself. And that's when I started working contracts just to stay alive as an entrepreneur. And I ended up working a marriage coaching contract, did very well, helped develop some content for them. I moved into mental health right after that. And I've literally worked a 5-year contract with a company that I just walked away from last month. And, then I ended up with a company that I'm currently with now, where it's all about serving, people who are dealing with problem gambling. And, on that journey of figuring out what type of client I really wanted to work with the most, what type of people I know I want to help people with problems. That's what it is. It's if you have problems that you feel like you can't solve, I'm the coach who wants to work with you. From all of my background and experience in coaching, I've developed 3 programs. One is called Doing the Math, which is all about comprehensive problem solving. One is called Package Our Talent, which is a wink to the business coaching for helping people to just package themselves in a presentable way to market themselves. And the other one is Relationship Repair, which is not just about romantic relationships, which you would think it would be from the marriage coaching, but it's me, putting a process together to help people with interpersonal relationships if you want to navigate through something and not push it away. And so bringing these skills to problem gamblers has been, I've seen the impact and the feedback, which is a part of why we're here, Gwen. When people are so surprised at how we show up when we're coaching them, when you're offering therapy to them, and you're actually helping them to map their own plans out of the trouble zone into freedom in mindset. And that's what it is for them. When people can tell you that, wow, I didn't think about gambling today, but it's something that's been brewing on their mind for the past several weeks, years, months. And this is a day that they wake up and they never had one thought, all because of practices, principles, and tools that we bring to the table to help them develop into a different direction. So I'm very proud, honestly, to have made it into this space with my coaching. I never knew where it would take me starting out with the life and business coaching, but I knew, I always knew I would end up here. I grew up in recovery, not in recovery for myself, but in a family with people who had different types of addictions. I've gone to AA meetings. I understand the nature and the behavior of how addiction can impact a family beyond the individual, how it can ruin relationships, how it can put you in a depression that you feel like you're going crazy. And so to have a resource such as us, Gwen, I am, very humbly proud to be someone that can contribute to the life of someone else, especially when they feel like their life is out of control.
Right. And Corinne, you have had such an incredible journey. And I'm just really glad that you ended up here with me.
As am I, Gwen. As am I. I'm very happy to be working with you. We have such a like-mindedness in how we work with people.
Right. And the passion.
Yes.
I'm always attracted to other people who really have a passion for helping people and working with them so they can achieve a higher quality of life. So yay.
Yeah. But I want to know more about how did we get here from your perspective?
Okay. So this is my second career, Corinne. I have an MBA. So I started off in business back in the early 2000s, and I've had several businesses. My family, we had a restaurant, and I worked with the restaurant quite a bit for many years. But I just became disenchanted with every day was pretty much just being concerned with the bottom line. How many customers, do I need to do more marketing? Do I need to do this? I mean, and I just wasn't passionate about it anymore. And I wanted to do something different. So I worked with this one organization and actually led a recovery group where I worked with people with all kinds of challenges, maybe alcohol, drugs, maybe anger, it may be overeating, or just whatever the challenge is, whatever the hang up or the challenge for the person was, we got together and supported one another. And I really, really liked that. I actually loved it. I was more looking forward to doing that than to do my work. And that was kind of like a wake-up call. a light bulb went off for me. Hey, why don't I just do this? So I achieved my certification to be a licensed chemical dependency counselor, and then went on to get a master's in clinical mental health counseling. So what was it that led me to actually want to help other people and work with them? I've experienced different trauma, different times in my life. You know, when I was in high school, there were some situations that occurred and some bullying. And then later on, there were some other life issues. But instead of me, getting the therapy, getting the help, I started self-medicating with alcohol and drugs. I mean, that's just the bottom line. I was self-medicating and ruining my life. And there was an intervention, and I was able to get counseling and get some help and restart my life. And I have had a much better life ever since then.
Gwen. Awesome.
So I wanted to help other people achieve the same thing that I was able to get. So that's why I do the work I do, Corinne. It's important to me to feel like I'm helping people to get away from the shame and the guilt that they feel, the judgments that other people are placing on them. Because I know that in order to recover from anything, I think when people are approached with compassion and understanding and empathy, they have a much better chance of recovering as opposed to people judging them, and
absolutely.
Yeah. And so I love the work I do. And I'm so glad that I was hired by Kindbridge. I became one of their clinicians, and I met you, Corinne.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, Kind Bridge. The name says it all, because it was a kind bridge for us to meet each other. I mean, we have two different walks of life. You're in Texas, I'm in Georgia, and here we are, through this bridge of kindness.
I meant to mention that I am located in Texas. If you can't tell by the way that I speak and my little twang I got going.
They can tell.
Texas, so that's what that is.
And we love that twang, Gwen. We love it. That is awesome, Gwen, because, I'm going to tell you, I don't think there's any other circumstance that you and I would have been able to meet to put our backgrounds together to help so many people achieve what we've helped them. We've seen people achieve recovery. Abstinence is what we aim for. We aim for abstinence. We're not aiming to reduce. We're aiming for abstinence. And we've seen many successful people. Many people go through this successfully. Now, when we say go through this successfully, we're not saying, oh, they're healed. Oh, it's over. What we're saying is they've latched on to a healing lifestyle, a recovery lifestyle, and they're holding it. They're holding on to it.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's more than just not gambling. It's about changing your lifestyle, changing the way that you think, utilizing coping skills and strategies when you have stress or anxiety, as opposed to trying to escape by gambling. It's about, learning to communicate effectively, setting boundaries, teaching people how to treat you. All of these things are important parts of recovery.
Very important. And we want you to keep tuning in, because one of the great things about our podcast is that there is no limit to what we can bring to this show to help you to pull yourself out of a problem gambling lifestyle and into a free headspace.
Now it's time for our reflection of the day. Placing one last bet will never again be for me simply killing a few minutes and leaving a nickel for the bookmaker. In exchange for the first bet, what I'd plunk down now would be my bank account, my family, our home, our car, my job, my sanity, and probably my life. It's too big a price and too great a risk. Do you remember your last bet?
That's an awesome question. And now we're moving into my favorite part of today, and that's the homework. Gwen and I are really big on working with people, but we want to see what you're going to do between the time we're working with you and the time you come back. So my assignment for you this week is to think about this question and write a letter. The question is, what would it take for you to break up with addiction? And in answering that, we would love for you to write a breakup letter to problem gambling. Think about the first time you gambled, how it transitioned, and the impact it made in your life. What will it take for you to break up with addiction? And write that letter today. Now that we've enjoyed such a great episode, it's time for us to give a shout out to our sponsors.
Addiction doesn't define you, and breaking up with it doesn't have to be a solo mission. KindBridge Behavioral Health offers safe, non-judgmental support anytime from anywhere. Visit kindbridge.com/appointments and start getting the help you deserve today.